called Living a Musical Life. For some of you, maybe you already know, but actually originally I used to do some music. I used to study music as well uh, throughout my, uh, well, during high school, I was quite serious about trying to be a musician. And so I applied to a music school as well. And so I did some studying here and there. And so unfortunately now it's just a kind of more of a hobby. So it's been kind of a while since I actually looked into the details of some of this musical stuff, but it's always been my interest and it's been my love for music. And I think maybe many of you also love music, possibly. And I hope that you guys can kind of see music as part of your life, but also realizing that there is such incredible principle behind music as well. Of course, I think, in any field you can find well, in every field there is God's principle, and you can really discover his love, and through that we can also see how God's been conducting the providence as well. So today though, we're going to in particular going to look at it from the perspective of music, and there's three broad categories that I've broken it up to. First part is going to talk about the music within, and then time and pitch, and then becoming a musician or a composer. So yes, hopefully by the end of this all of you will be a composer or a musician. So let's just go ahead and begin. The first point here that I want to talk about is the music within. I'm going to actually show you a video clip really quickly. And based on this video clip, I think you'll see how actually, whether you like music or not, I hope all of you like music, but if not, that's fine. But music is a part of everyone's life. And actually, we all have this understanding of music subconsciously in our minds and inside of our body, you could say. And this is actually a way where they talk about how actually, regardless of culture, race, geography, wherever you are, somehow everybody has this certain scale or sound in all of us. And that's what we're going to be looking at. So this is a very famous musician, a vocalist, as well as a composer named Bobby McFerrin, very famous. I don't know if you've ever seen him play together with like Yo-Yo Ma, but he's going to demonstrate something. So let's do this. And he's gonna have the audience sing along, so you guys can sing along as well if you like, and then kind of see how if it's true or not. I'm pretty sure it is true, so please try it. Hold on, this audio is kind of weird. Let me just screen share again. Okay, here we go.
Talking about expectations. Watch. Ba, ba. Okay. Now, what's interesting to me about that is, regardless of where I am, anywhere, every audience gets that.
But
It doesn't matter, you know, it's just, you know, the pentatonic scale for some reason.
if you're looking for a
Okay, so I don't know if you're able to do it yourself and experience it, but basically, yes, this is what we call the pentatonic scale. This is quite popular, a popular scale that everybody uses. And all of you have actually sang the pentatonic scale, especially if you are in our movements. This pentatonic scale is just everywhere, actually. Most of the time, if you're taking a shower and you start humming, you are subconsciously singing the pentatonic scale because it's the most easiest scale to sing. And it's a certain relationship of these notes. It has a certain tendency to want to go in a certain direction. And each note here are certain notes that have a very powerful pull to it, actually. And the biggest powerful note, of course, is what we call, in music theory, we call this the tonic note. But basically, it's home base. So every note will leave the home and want to come back to home. So when we do this, we used to do this as a training to train our ears and kind of get a sense of feeling of it. And originally, when I did this in the past, I had everybody sing this together. And when we sing this together, you'll feel your body being pulled to want to sing a certain note. And that's what we call tension and release in music. But basically, in this pentatonic scale, without going into details, there's actually really incredible stuff if you study this. And there's a lot of principle behind this too. As you can see, numbers, there's a lot of numbers in music, actually. Number 7, the number 12, all these are numbers that we fear in the principle. But in music as well, you break it up to 12 keys, 12 notes. But in a typical scale, we have 7 notes in a scale, what we call a major scale. But this is what we call a pentatonic scale. There's 5 notes, basically. So we have the note, the first, second, third, fifth, and sixth note of a major scale, which creates that sound. And this is actually really just interesting. It's such an interesting thing that everybody knows this somehow. Now, of course, we do live in a world where we communicate. So, of course, there's certain behavior things. I don't know if you noticed, his movements actually made you subconsciously understand pitch. It subconsciously made you understand a scale without having to actually know it. And so there's actually a lot of communication going on in understanding a pentatonic scale. So within the notes themselves too, actually, there's a certain kind of relationship that I'm going to talk a little bit about later on as well. But for now, we're going to keep it like this. Now, with the pentatonic scale, what's really cool is if you guys ever want to, if you have a keyboard or you found a piano in your room or someone's house, if you want to sound cool, all you have to do is press the black key. So the black key is also another key. It's in a different key, but it's also a pentatonic scale. Those 5 sets of keys that are in black is also known as a pentatonic scale. Now, if you press on any one of those at any time with any relationship, it will all sound beautiful. People be like, wow, you are so amazing. And you're like, yeah, I am amazing. I'm playing a pentatonic scale. And you'll just sound amazing. It's really incredible. And this is actually how people start off playing jazz as well. If you want to play, if you want to improvise, you usually start on a pentatonic scale and you just press the black keys and then you just have fun with it. And you just hear how it makes sound. You're like, oh, this is cool. That's cool. And then as you go through it, you'll realize that actually most of the holy songs are in the pentatonic scale. So I try to, with my poor piano skill, I'm not a pianist, okay? So don't make fun of my piano skill. And it was on my computer. I tried to type it on my computer. So it was not so great, but just to prove that holy songs are in the black keys or in a different key, whatever, you will see that's a pentatonic. Notice the black keys are the only ones lighting up. It's a little hard to see. Okay, so that was all pentatonic scale, all in the black keys. If you want to play the holy song, all you got to do is fiddle around with the black keys and you'll be able to play the holy songs. Most of the holy songs, I would say about 80-90% of the holy songs. Sometimes there's an occasional one white key in between just to give it a little bit of a color. But for the most part, it's all in the black key. And that's just a thing because with the pentatonic scale, it just sounds very nice because it's very homey sound. It's a very homey kind of sound. It's not too much tension going on. So that's what the holy song is actually made up of. So that's why I was saying that actually, if you are part of our movement or you studied and you sang together with us, you have all sang the pentatonic scale without even knowing it. Yes, but also it was already just within you as well. So that's what a pentatonic scale is like. And so when you look at the pentatonic scale, it tries to create a certain kind of sound that sounds very comfortable, very peaceful. And that's a state of joy when you hear it. That's why it's interesting. Classical music also has a lot of pentatonic scales. Jazz comes from classical music. Hip hop comes from classical music. Classical music is really the foundation of all music, actually. And when you look at that, you'll see so much incredible principles in the classic. And one of the basic things is pentatonic scale, actually. And that's why the holy song also comes from that as well. So in music, there's certain kind of peace that we can attain, joy that comes from hearing pentatonic scales. Now, of course, we're here to talk about the principle, and we're trying to understand how this relates to us in terms of a relationship with God and people. You could say that originally we were supposed to be having these relationships that brings us joy, actually. But unfortunately, we know that that's not the case, right? So this is from Introduction. This is the line that everybody knows, the first line of the divine principle. Just let me read it really quickly. Every human being is struggling to attain lifelong happiness and overcome misfortune from the commonplace affairs of individuals for the great events that shape the course of history, each at root an expression of the human aspiration for ever greater happiness. So, meaning everybody wants that kind of pentatonic feeling. Everybody wants to experience it. We're subconsciously seeking for that kind of joy. Hence, we all can sing the pentatonic scale. Now, in our life as well, we have that as well. That's what we call the original mind and the conscience, right? The divine principle says the original mind or conscience is in a relationship of internal and external. So you can just think of it as the same thing. For simplicity, I'm not going to distinguish the difference of those two. But the original mind has a tendency to bring us towards a sense of peace and happiness. As the pentatonic scale as well, each note has a tendency to pull us in a direction that feels at peace, at home. And so in our life, there's many people. Just imagine people are just notes. There's all these different notes in my relationship with life. But somehow, some of these notes are not making sense. They're outside the pentatonic scale. And it just doesn't feel good. I was going to actually do something that really sounds out of tune. And if you heard that all day, you would go crazy. And sometimes they do that. Some songs will make you feel crazy because they're intentionally colliding with the pentatonic scale, you could say. It's going outside of the comfort zone and it's causing friction. So much friction that we don't like it. And our relationship is the same thing too, right? We have all kinds of people who has different kind of notes, but when that note comes together in the wrong way, we don't really like it, right? It doesn't feel good. And so that's why in the principle, that's why the Messiah comes as well. So from that perspective, we want to understand what the mission of the Messiah is, what he comes to restore. This is from chapter 4, the divine principles. So let me just read this as well. Jesus came as the Messiah for nothing less than the complete salvation of humanity. He was to fulfill the goal of the providence of restoration. Jesus was supposed to establish the kingdom of heaven first on the earth. We can infer this from Jesus' own teaching to his disciples. You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. According to the principle of creation, a person who has realized the purpose of creation does not commit sin because he is in full harmony with God and possesses a divine nature. With respect to the purpose of creation, such a person is perfect as Heavenly Father is perfect. Right? So each note is supposed to possess this divine nature, actually. Each human being is supposed to possess that. That's the state of perfection. That's the state where there's harmony, which means there's certain peace and happiness. But in music as well, what ends up happening is that note becomes a note that doesn't make sense in a chord or in music, and it causes tension. And that makes people feel cringe. certain songs and certain music, and this is actually something they do in marketing as well. They use certain songs to make people behave in a certain way. If you ever noticed, right, this is something they do in marketplaces too. If they want people to come in slowly, they play a certain song that has certain kind of chords that causes people to slow down in shopping. But if you know that this is rush hour and you want people in and out, they play a certain song that causes people to quickly choose things. Go to the next thing, go to the next thing, because you feel anxious. So you got to go quickly. So this is something that even marketing uses because music has that kind of power to pull us in a certain direction. And so in our relationship, this happens too, right? Some people make us feel anxious. Some people make us feel angry. It makes us pull us in a certain direction that makes us do things very quickly. We might be rash. We might panic. And some people makes us feel really comfortable. And suddenly we slow down and suddenly we talk very casually. Or sometimes we open up to certain people in certain ways, right? So different notes, different people causes us to feel different emotions. Now, all the notes are beautiful though. And this is another aspect that I couldn't add this time, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but every note has a certain beauty. Every human being has a certain beauty as well. And that only appears when we are perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's when we experience that we're in the heavenly kingdom, right? So for that sake, it says that we need to possess a divine nature. So the Messiah comes to give us divine nature. That's what the engraftment means, that the divine nature that the Messiah brings enters me, and with that divine nature, we become perfect. So what is divine nature? Or in the unification thought, we call this the divine character. So we're just going to read this to understand just basically what that is. It says that the contents of the original image refers to the attributes of God. Here, the contents of divine image, Seong-sang and Hyung-sang, Yang and Yin, and individual images, and the contents of divine character, heart, logos, and creativity. So original image, just to be simple, just talking about God. When we look at God, we have God's mind and God's body. Divine image is referring to God's body. And then divine character is referring to God's heart. So within God's mind, there is the heart, logos, and creativity. Right? And this is what the unification thought defines as the divine nature. It's the same thing. And so the fall is essentially we lost that. We lost the divine nature. And so we're supposed to reclaim that divine nature. We're going to read another quote later on too. It's going to talk about that too. So to reclaim this divine nature, the divine character, is essentially the goal of the providence of restoration. But to restore this, we have to understand what are some of the basic factors that we have to be able to do this. And so I'm going to cut a little bit, so it's not going to connect directly, but I want to talk a little bit of some of the basic, kind of the building block of music. And that has to do with time and pitch. So in music, time and pitch that's basically everything. That's what music is. There's time and there's pitch. But the relationship between time and pitch is like internal and external cause and results. So time is something that has to be there. Actually, back in the day, my music professors used to say that time is more important. You can play the wrong notes, but as long as you're in time, it will sound good. You can play the right notes with the right scale, but if you don't have the right time, it will sound completely awful, right? Time is important. Like when you guys think about it, when you say, oh, I feel the music, I feel I'm in the groove, you're referring to the time actually. There's a certain tempo and you're getting onto that rhythm. And then the pitch is just the color that actually adds to that time. And it creates a different nuance of emotions. But time is very important. Time itself creates emotion, right? It creates some kind of feeling. And so when you look at time and pitch, it's like this. When you talk about pitch is referring to the frequency, how quickly the frequencies are going. Or technically speaking, it's how many cycles of that vibration are inside one period of time. So for example, within one period of time for 1 second, there's only one cycle. That's a very low frequency, so it's low pitch. Higher pitches are based on having higher frequencies. So for example, for the same amount of time up here, you can have up to 3 cycles. So you fit 3 cycles in one period. Right? So another way to calculate is distance. So here, they're calculating more from distance. What's the distance between one cycle to the other cycle, right? So the higher the pitch, the higher the frequency within a certain given time creates a higher pitch. That's why pitch is just the result. It's the external. It's more the results, the horizontal, whereas time is the vertical, right? So timing is very important in the providence as well. Without the proper timing, you'll see that actually throughout the human history, that's what caused the suffering and the pain of God and also human beings. So, but just to kind of show the power of time and pitch, I just have another video that I'm going to show. Now, in this video, this guy's going to be singing, and there is a little bit of a guitar in the background, some beats, but later we're going to see something added, which adds a more concrete time. And that's going to totally change the music. So this is actually by a very famous guy. He's famous. He started to become more famous now, but back then he was just like a genius in the world of jazz. His name is Jacob Collier. I don't know if you guys ever heard of him. Quite famous. So what he usually does, he will ask people to send videos, random videos of them singing, whatever, and then he'll make music out of it. It's really incredible. So let's watch this.
Girl, let's start things off casual and avoid a big surprise, but just taking things from day to day. Yeah, I can see in your eyes, love might just be a figure of speech, but if you want, we can figure that out with me while we start things off casual. Girl, let's start things off casual and avoid a big surprise, but just taking things from day to day. And I can see in your eyes, love might just be a figure of speech, but if you want, we can figure it out with me while we start things off casual.
That was groovy, right? I used to listen to just that part like 50 times a day. It's just so incredible. This musician, Jacob Collier, has such incredible creativity. Yeah. Sometimes a little bit too crazy that the music I don't understand anymore, but he's really incredible. But anyway, so this is the building block of essentially music, is time and pitch, especially time. When you have the drum and the bass, drum and bass is like the groove, basically. They determine the groove of a music. Time and bass is so essential to music. The moment you pull that out, suddenly it feels like you're floating. It's like, I don't know what this music is about anymore. But suddenly you have the drum and the bass together, it just like anchors you down and you're like, yes, now I'm grooving, right? That's the power of time, basically. And pitch is the flower, basically, on top of that. It fills up the other little spaces, right? Now, then what is the building block of my life then? Actually, the building block of my life is also time, and instead of pitch, it's space. Time and space is literally the building block of my life on this earth. Right? When you think about it, time and space, well, time is basically one-dimensional. Space is three-dimensional. So technically speaking, we are living in a world of time and space, which is called a four-dimensional world. And in this world, we experience all kinds of things, actually. And in this world of time and space, you can feel joy. Sometimes you feel pain. Sometimes you feel sadness because you lose somebody that was precious to you. But then you feel lots of joy when a new life is born. When you're so happy when you meet a friend that you haven't met in such a long time. Or you're really pissed off because someone that you thought was a good person just betrayed you, and now you're in this kind of deep resentment. But then suddenly you flip over because actually that person didn't betray you. You actually completely misunderstood. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. So between this world of time and space and our relationship with people, we have all kinds of emotions that comes up. This is the music that we're creating in our everyday today life, right? Without time and space, we can't even experience that, actually. However, Father talks about this time and space, right? And the point of this world of time and space is not to just be attached to time and space either, though, right? Like for music too, we have time and space. We have the tempo, a metronome that's constantly clicking back and forth. And then we have space, the pitch. But the point is to experience a certain feeling from that music. It's not just for the literal written music itself to read and to play. It's because we want to experience some kind of emotions through songs, right? Why do we listen to, songs nowadays? The biggest music that always gets a hit song is what? It's breakup songs. Why? Because everybody feels like we had some breakup, right? We feel some kind of pain. We feel lonely. So we love to listen to breakup songs and it just feels good. We feel like somebody's understanding me somehow, right? You feel like you can let your emotions out. That's why we listen to music, right? No one's literally, unless you're a musician, but typically most people aren't just listening to music. Like, let me calculate the beats and the bass. And musicians do that. That's what I used to do. I like to count how many beats are in a bar, or the time signatures, or the instruments and all that kind of stuff. But that's a musician, right? That eventually you guys, we all need to do that. But for the main part, it's to experience and enjoy the music, right? And so this is what Father says here. This is from Chonsungyan. It says, which is more important, our physical self or our spirit self? Not the flesh, but the spirit. Our flesh has a shelf life averaging 70 to 80 years within the limited realm of time and space before disappearing into nothingness. But our spirit has the power to transcend both time and space. Accordingly, it is our original purpose to recognize our historic responsibility and fulfill it. However well you may live physically, in the final analysis, you will all die. Our bodies will perish in any event. That is how we are made. Then which are more important, spiritual standards or physical standards? Our lives are not meant to be based on physical standards. The flesh exists for the spirit and vice versa. Do not get stuck in the rut of a secular lifestyle. You must become entities that combine the spirit and flesh in a position of saving the flesh and begin the position of greater worth. So here Father's talking about transcending time and space. Meaning in music, it's not just about time and the pitch. That's not what you're looking at. It's the experience of the music itself, right? There's a certain emotion that comes from it. So the whole point of our life in this world of time and space is not time and space itself. The whole point is the experience that we get through time and space. So what would that be then? Well, Father is saying that the spirit transcends time and space. The spirit world that we go to later on is the world that transcends time and space. Well, what is the spirit world then? Well, we know in Father's word that the spirit world is a place of love, right? It's the world of love. Father said that in the spirit world, we breathe God's love. And so what we need to create and experience on this earth is what love is about, right? If we can't experience love on this earth, peace in this world, then we know that once we die in the spirit world, we will not be able to experience that love and peace in the spirit world as well. Right? We have to build that right now. We need to experience that as much as we can. And how we do that, though, is through time and space, though, which is time and pitch and music sense, right? So I want to talk, just read a couple of quotes too, where Father's emphasizing this point here about how it's the heart and it's the love that we have to connect to. But that's what transcends time. Right? This is from two quotes from the prayer book. It says, we know that you created everything for us. We earnestly hope and desire that you will connect your sons and daughters in a place where we can call you Father in secret as valuable people. Today, we must not just gaze remotely at the patriots of the past who cried out for you. Please let all the content of the past appear as material of present reality. Then all the circumstances of today will connect the present reality and the future. And please let the actual past testify to today. Oh, Father, today, this time is a time that has a historical distance from Jesus. But we know that even though there is a distance in history, there is no distance in the world of hearts. Therefore, please do not let us become people who believe in the historical Jesus. Please let us become people who are able to know and believe Jesus directly through our hearts. This is actually very important, I think. This second prayer, especially, this is something that I always remembered. Immediately, this is the prayer that I remembered, and I had to find it. But Jesus is not just a Jesus, somebody in the past, right? Jesus is a being that is still existing now. And that's because it transcends time. But it is through time, though. Through time, we learn and realize the heart of Jesus and the heart of God as well. When you study the parallel of history, why do we study the parallel of history? The divine principle explains that the reason why we need to study the history of restoration is so that we can experience the living God, so that we can understand God's heart. God's love is manifested in the form of time. It's like a pulse. Throughout the human history, there's a pulse, right? That's why we see in the parallel of history, it's like unbelievable. It's not a coincidence. There's a certain timing where God is trying to do something, and if it passes, then he has to wait for another opportunity, but still in the basic tempo that God is conducting. This is what heart is, right? We have a pulse. If God just decides, like, if your heart decides, like, today I just want to take 2 minutes to take a break, to not pump, what would happen? You'd die immediately, right? Not immediately, you suffer for like 2 minutes, maybe you'll survive, but most likely you would come close to death, right? Your heart is constantly beating. And that's the very proof of my life, which is a manifestation of love. History has been basically, there's a certain heart. That pulse of God is what was leading to this history of restoration. That's why we can see the parallel of history. If it wasn't for the living God, and that God is not a parent and God is not a being of love, we would not see the relationships between different events. The reason why we can see the parallel of history and see the relationship with all these things that happened is due to the fact that God is a being of heart and he's pulsing with this heart of love and is constantly beating to save us, right? That's what the divine principle is saying at the very beginning of introduction of the part 2, right? It says this is why we have to study the principle. And through this, right, the principle wants us to know that God is living, God is breathing, and God is loving us. He is our parent. That's what we need to experience through studying time, basically. That's why time is very important. Without time, we would never understand that there is love flowing through history, right? And so we can't just see history as something in the past. As it says, we have to see this as something as a present reality in the future. And so that's why in restoration, the main thing in the principle is to experience the heart. So music is the same thing. The whole point of why we have to have a proper, strict time is so that we can experience the beauty of the creation of music. I don't know if you've ever seen any music where time is all over the place. It sounds chaotic and it sounds so out of whack, right? But I don't know if you ever heard of music. This is more like a little bit more complicated music. And sometimes you just don't notice it because they weave it in so perfectly. We call this a certain thing is called polyrhythm, meaning there's more than one kind of beat that ultimately lines up after a certain bar. So for example, I don't want to do examples right, it's too complicated, but basically there's multiple beats. And this is actually what's happening. When you have multiple beats, it feels like everybody is stuttering. Oh, maybe a good example. I remember I was going to give this example. If you ever go driving and you click on the blinker, you know how you hear that, right? You hear that sound, and then you see the car in front of you is also doing that, but it's off, right? Like I'm going, it's off. But eventually, do you ever notice that it actually matches? At one point, it hits the same point. This is what we call polyrhythm. We're at totally different beats, but there's one point that it actually meets together. And from that point onwards, every single time we go through that one cycle, it will beat on one, basically. And polyrhythm is like that as well. In music, they do this a lot. And sometimes they do like 3 polyrhythms or 4 polyrhythms, and it just sounds chaotic. When that happens, you know what the most important thing is? The most important thing for a musician is that you keep your internal metronome no matter what. So we always internalize tempo, actually. My music teacher, actually I heard from a professor who said that they had to have a certain internal timing. So they placed that, I don't know if you guys know what a metronome is. It's just basically a tempo that keeps beating. So I had this electronic metronome and I'd sleep with it. You put it in next to your ear and you just listen to it all day long. And then that creates a certain standard in your mind of what 100 is. So for example, even now, I tested it yesterday. I was like, do I still got that? Because I remember I did this and I had to get 100 beats per minute. And I wanted to test myself. And I was only off by 1 beat, but it was 100. It was basically 100 beats. Anyways, I don't want to explain the details, but anyways, you have to figure it out. And there's an internal clock that everybody can have, that we can train ourselves to have. And in music, everybody needs to have internal clocks, basically. Otherwise, we don't match in the end. And especially when there's so many variables, like our life, we have so many variables, right? People from different backgrounds, different religion, different race, different age, different gender. That creates a totally different beat. Everybody has a different beat. But everybody's beating where ultimately there's actually a point where everybody meets at the same point. And this is a really incredible kind of science that actually they did an experiment on that. They put 100 metronomes, and within a minute or two, it will beat at the same time. And it's incredible. I don't know how that happens, but there's some kind of science behind it, principle behind it. I don't want to go in details about it now, but we need to have a certain internal time, right? And so this has a lot to do with connecting to God, right? So time has to do with the vertical, and that has to do with God. We need to understand the pulse of God's heart and the pulse of how God is conducting the providence. Without understanding that, we cannot actually conduct the providence. So just to kind of summarize that point, it's about becoming a musician now. One good characteristic about a musician, having a good feel to it, meaning you have a good tempo to it. You understand where the tempo is. If you don't understand tempo, if you can't keep in time, no matter how technique and crazy you can play, nobody wants to hire you because you can't keep a good tempo. Like nobody wants you, right? So you need good tempo. You need to have a good understanding of music theory, meaning understanding of scales and chords and understand the relationships of different notes, right? And then also to be creative, right? To create something new from it. So it's not boring all the time. So musicians are constantly trying to create something new, right? And so these are characteristics that makes up a good musician, right? And just to emphasize how much time is important and how much the feel is important, I want to show you there's another clip. So we have a lot of clips today. Hopefully you're enjoying it. It's music. This guy name is Victor Wooten. He is a bassist. He's an amazing bassist. And he has such an incredible philosophy of music too. He's an educator as well. But as a musician, this guy is like incredible. But he teaches about how the role of a musician, especially because he's a bassist, he talks about the role of all the supporting musicians for the melody, right? And so I think this is the role of basically what God has been doing for us as well. So I just wanted to show you this. So for background knowledge, he's going to show you how he can actually make it so that there's two people going to be playing, him and this other person. He's going to make it sound like technically he's in the wrong key, but he's going to make him sound right, and he'll make the other person sound wrong. And then eventually he'll flip it around and make the guitarist sound incredible. And he'll show how you can do that based on time and pitch, but mainly by pitch at time. So we're going to look at this.
Well, the main thing is that if I groove hard enough, I can play any note, and you will like it.
Okay.
Guaranteed, I can play any note. I can play in the total wrong key so well that I can make you sound wrong.
I want you to demonstrate that if you.
Oh, absolutely. So let's use some theory. What key are you in? But let's say I go here. That doesn't work, does it? But watch this. Who's wrong right now? Yeah. But watch. This is going to make him sound better. Watch. Now what he's playing sounds like the best thing ever. So sometimes to make him sound better, I'll play in a different place. Right? I'll play in a different place. Play that groove one more time. Right? So this may be using theory, but it's really just using my ear. Instead of just doing this. Right? That's cool. This is cooler. I'm going to reshape his groove to make it sound better. I might go. Right? Keep listening. Right? Now watch. Look at your head now, right? As soon as I bring it home, you're like, oh, that's the coolest thing ever. So as a musician, as a rhythm section musician, that's my job. My job is not to just play with him. My job is to make him sound better. Right?
So I don't know if you guys were able to feel it. If you guys had a nice speaker to it, it would even sound better. Um, and as a musician, oh my gosh, what he did is just beyond me. Like, if you look at the technicality of what he just did something unbelievable actually as a musician, but he did it like nothing. It was just casual for him, you know? But anyways, the point is he was able to do something at the beginning where he created a groove. Essentially, he made a better groove than the groove that he was doing. And he played in a totally wrong key, actually. If you ever play on a piano and you hit the black and the white key next to each other, it sounds awful, right? It's like, that hurts my ear. That's essentially what he did. He actually played just a half, we call it a half step, right next to the key that he played, which is totally out. So when he played that scale, it was like, oh, that sounds a little bit weird. But the groove made it sound like I am the star and you are wrong. That's what he did. But then he switched it and he went in the right key. And then he played a certain simple groove that supports the groove that he's doing. And it matched. And so suddenly the guitar sounded a little bit better, right? Just a little bit. But then he did something even more crazy, which just involves a little bit more theory. It's not random tension. Tension has purpose too. There's certain tension that you can do, but if you place it in the right place, it creates a certain kind of sound that actually feels warm. Sometimes you can create like a very, sad sound, but it's not conflicting. It has a very specific intention to that, specific intention to its tension. So that's what he actually did. So he wasn't playing some random key though, the second time. He actually did something very theoretical in supporting the key, but still creating a little bit of tension with the right groove. And he came right back and it made you feel like, okay, that was a release that felt really good. And now I'm even more into the groove. And so that's what he did, which is really like, this is like God level musician. Like that was amazing kind of stuff. That's what he does, right? So this is what makes him as a good musician though. He's able to put himself in a place that allows the main musician to just shine and to be the star. And he can do that. And he can easily manipulate that and go front and back and front and back. But he always teaches, and as an educator, there's a lot of stuff he does. And he talks about, we have to have the right view of music. It's not just to teach them to practice. It's a part of our life. And he teaches about how we need to teach the story that we want to share through music, not just play the coolest thing with all these crazy scales and fast, licks. And he teaches about supporting and understanding where you stand. And is it time for me to shine or is it time for me to support? And he does this and has a proper way of educating people to do that. And it's just really incredible stuff he does. Anyways, I don't want to go too much into that right now. But anyways, that's a good musician, understanding good time, understanding of music theory, basic principle, relationship of notes and chords, and also having this creative mind to create this interesting groove, but at the same time to allow the musician to really shine, right? So now I want to talk a little bit about human beings. What are we supposed to be like? So when we look at God, so that was the characteristics of a musician. Now I want to look at the characteristic of God. We call this the divine nature, or originally the Chinese character is God in nature. So it technically can say God's nature or God's characteristics. But in unification thought, we call this divine characteristics. Divine principle, we say divine nature. All the same thing, okay? When you look at God's characteristics, though, there's three things that we already covered. It's the heart, logos, and also creativity. But it's all centered on true love, right? That's the characteristics of God as a being. And then human beings, of course, we're fallen human beings. So as fallen human beings, what is our characteristics? And we call this the fallen nature, right? We have a fallen characteristics, meaning that instead of having the heart logos or the word and creativity centered on true love, we now have what we call the false heart with the false logos and false creativity centered on false love. And this is what defines us as Satan's lineage, actually. So this is a quote from the divine principle as well. It says, Eve was to have eaten the fruit of goodness by consummating her God-centered love. Then she would have received the essence of God's divinity or divine nature and multiplied a good lineage. However, she ate of the fruit of evil by consummating her evil love centered on Satan. Hence, she received the essence of his evil nature or fallen nature and multiplied an evil lineage from which our sinful society descended. Right? So we talked about one of the quotes about what Jesus came for. And Jesus came to allow us to possess God's divine nature. That Whether or not we have God's divine nature determines my lineage, actually. That's why Father said the center of lineage is Shimjang. It's the heart. It's not about the biological lineage. Of course, that is important as well. But the main thing that determines whether we're of God's lineage or Satan's lineage is the heart. And so going back to that, it means, do I have the characteristics of God, which means the Shimjang, the logos, and creativity centered on true love? What does that mean? In the unification thought, we define Shimjang, or the heart, as an irresistible emotional impulse to give and to love, right? There's this constant heart that says, I want to love, I want to love, I want to give, right? And then logos, centered on true love, means kind of basic principles and laws and understanding the structure of the relationship of love. Meaning, like, for example, you have to know when to speak and when to listen. To have a proper relationship of love, you can't both be speaking at the same time. If someone is speaking, you have to be able to listen, right? And if you're speaking, you have to make sure the person is listening. In a society, in a classroom, there's different roles in relationships. If there's a teacher, there's a student. If there's a teacher in the room, then I, as a student, have to respect what the teacher says and learn. I'm here to learn everything from the teacher. And if you're the teacher and they're the students, then you have to understand your role as a teacher, which is to educate the children. So you can't just be doing whatever you want and just having fun. You have to teach, right? And we have to understand the different roles. That's what logos, or the word, means, meaning understanding the principle behind it, right? And then creativity. This is another very important part, because God is a being who created. He's our creator. And we as human beings have to become co-creators, the second creator. But what are we creating? We have to create love. But unfortunately, with the fall, what ended up happening was the opposite, right? So now we have this false heart, which is like a pulse, right? God's heart is this irresistible impulse to give. It's like this pulse, constant beating, saying, I want to give. What can I do next? What can I do next? What can I do next, right? This heart is pulsing to give. But now the fall is the opposite. The pulse is taking now. Why didn't you understand me? Why did you say that? Do you hate me? Why can't you understand me? Do this for me, right? There's all these expectations and demands, and it's the pulse of taking, essentially. It's all about me now, right? Whereas the other one is centered on true love, which means it's the object part. But now we have the wrong pulse, meaning we're on the wrong metronome now. We're on the wrong beat from God's beat. Hence, we're colliding. Now everybody is beating in different things, but now there's no point that actually meets. So it's no longer music. So what's the experience? You feel cringy. You feel like, ugh, this does not sound good. Meaning, I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I feel angry. I feel resentful, right? So this is like the other, in the musician, what Victor did was he went, it's all about me. And he basically did what? I'm right, even though he's in the wrong key. He created a groove in his own time that made the other guy wrong. Right? In our relationship, we do this a lot. Right? Even though, objectively speaking, maybe the other person is right, you will create your own theory and your own logic and your own reasoning and your own tempo and say, I am right, and you're wrong. And this is what we actually do a lot, because we have the false beat. And we try to emphasize that too much, that kills the other person, essentially. That's what happened to Cain and Abel, right? Cain had his own beat, his own pulse that could not resonate with the pulse that Abel had in relationship to God. And so he didn't like that. So what's the best thing to do? In a music, if a note doesn't make sense, all you got to do is get rid of the note, and then it sounds better. In relationships, what do we do? If there's somebody in my life that I'm creating this music with, but it does not sound good, then we just take it away. That's why we cut off people, right? If I don't like somebody because they're not doing what I want, or they're not giving me what I want, or they don't appreciate me well, I have my own justification. But with my beat, we cut people off, right? That's why Father says in the spirit world, we'll be lonely in the end, because we're cutting people off based on my own beats, right? And so that's why the heart, this restoration of God's heart is so important, which means the restoration of God's divine nature, which means we have to understand the pulse, the timing of God, right? And so once we can do that, then, like Father says, it will be the kingdom of heaven. So this is a video clip which many of you may have already seen from the Day of Victory of Love. So let's watch this together.
이제 다 끝났어. 다 끝났다고 아버님 말씀 다 끝났습니다. 그 이상은 뭐래요? 90평생 남긴 말씀 가운데 입적인 가운데 뒤집어다가 다 이룬 거예요. 다 끝났습니다. 맞아요? 그러니 입적 뒤집어 놓았으니 여러분 못 갖고 입적해요. 그것까지 뒤집었기 때문에 그대로 입적하므로 나라 백성의 천국이 내 것이 아니될 수 없나요? 너 입적 안 하기 때문에 문제야. 네 마음대로 해? 오늘 끝날 깨끗이 나니까 내가 가뿐합니다. 나 따라다니지 말라고. 입적해놓고 와라. 그러면 내가 아들로서의, 제자로서의, 종으로서의 대접 안 할 수 없습니다. 그러면 살 수 있어요. 갈 길이 있습니다. 전부 다 입적하면 다 잘했다 할 수 있게 해주겠다는데 왜 걱정이야? 그 대신 뭐이나면 못 갖고 입적했느냐? 원리 말씀이야. 흔들게 말씀 가지고 입적했습니다. 선생님이 교본 교조가 있어요. 그거 갖고 입적하라고. 입적하라는 거야. 입적이 도적이야. 야야. 나도 이제는 입적할 수 있다는 거야. 응? 참부 무슨 밤낮에 부모를 해방시켜 줬으니 해방시켜 준 날짜를 입적해 주소. 당신의 영원한 천국 주인 될 수 있는 아들 딸로 입적해 주소. 그 아니야. 내가 그렇게 됐으니 내 교본 교수 입적하라고 나도 그렇게 준다는 거야. 배운 것밖에 없으니까. 안 그래? 그거밖에 없어. 밀린 거 다 하라고 입적. 오대내 가더라도 천국이야. 국경이 없어져서요. 있나 없나?
없습니다.
입적하라고. 입적 교재는 내가 만들어줘서.
Okay, so as all of you know, even if you don't speak Korean, there's a certain term that kept on popping up, right? Like a pulse, right? It keeps bothering you. 입적, 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 입적. Meaning registration, right? Father says we need to register. This is what Father kept on saying. It's not just registration too, though. Throughout Father's life, there's certain words that Father uses constantly, right? And we hear that so many times. What happens? It feels kind of annoying. Sometimes we're like, okay, we heard that enough. We heard about unity enough. We heard about mind-body unity. We heard about lineage. We heard about this. We heard about that, right? The reason why Father's doing that, and the reason why in the Providence of Restoration we study about numbers and the timeline, is because if we don't have some kind of set beat, we'd be lost. We as human beings, we would not be able to understand love. For example, as parents, the only reason why children understand the parents' love is because they're unchangingly giving love and care for them. If the parents were to constantly change, go back and forth, children become very unstable, emotionally and psychologically speaking, they're very unstable. But the only reason why they can be stable is because there's constantly a parent who's guiding them and loving them, listening to them, talking to them, right? And that kind of love that's coming out from the parent is like a pulse, it's a beat. And as long as that beat is consistently there, it allows the child to be emotionally stable. But when we lose sight of that tempo, that beat, we become anxious. And if any of you have ever played music, you will know this. When you're in a group of people and you're playing together and you're the one lost, you're just like, oh shoot, what do I do? Like you're lost and you start looking left and right and you're not trying to figure out where I'm at. You're trying to communicate with eyes, like, where are we? And then the guy's like, here. And you're like, okay, here. And then you mess up and you're like, oh, wrong one. Try to get back on it. It's like the worst thing, especially on like a concert or like the actual gig. And you're just like lost and people are watching you and you're trying to look like, yeah, I'm communicating them. It's like, it's okay. But you're like totally panicking because you have no idea where you're at, right? And that's why we have a leader usually. The leader gives us cues. And typically the main person that does that, drummers are very important giving us cues. So a lot of times if you hear something with the drummer suddenly like, bam, like smashing something, it's a cue. It's a cue to let the people know we're here right now that we've already discussed about. Every time I hit here, it means that we're around this part. And that gives us the cue immediately. The musicians can get right back on, right? And so throughout the human history, a lot of things happen, right? And when we look at like a parallel of history and things like that, in reality, that period of time, nothing really gets done. And it's like the last 3 years or the last something years or the last final years is when everything is like kind of in a rush trying to fulfill things, right? Father did that too. There's a 40-year wilderness course. The final 3 years is crucial because in that final 3 years, Father is trying to give us cues, but everybody's lost. God is trying to give us cues, like it's here, guys, it's right here. And that's why during the last days, there's confusion, but we have to pay attention to where the actual cue is, right? And that's what we have to focus on. And so as a good musician, we have to always listen and look at, if it's like an orchestra or a concert band, you look at well, I forgot the name, the guy who's conducting, right? The conductor, right? You look at him because he's giving you the cue. He always cues people in the different places so that we know, oh, this is here, right? And so Father is giving us this cue, and especially towards the end of his life. And it's a certain cue that Father wants to tell us. And that has to do with this issue of registration, rebirth, songwa, right? There's all these terms that Father suddenly used towards the end of his life, constantly, like a cue to us, to saying that we have to realign to that beat, right? In the provenance is very interesting. Like I said, time is more important than pitch. I'm not saying pitch is not important. It is important, but time is more important. In the providence of restoration, you can have great saints and sages throughout the history, but it doesn't matter if the Messiah is not there. They can't be saved. The timing of when the Messiah comes and when the people are ready for that time is more important, actually. That's why in the principle it says, right? How is a chosen person chosen? How is the chosen people decided? And it's explained in the divine principle. It says, well, they have to have good merits from their ancestors. They have to be good throughout their life as well. Then there's a couple of conditions, but ultimately it says at the end, ultimately it's up to God when God sends the Messiah, and whoever's there at that timing with those qualifications can then be the chosen people. It's timing. Timing is crucial in the providence. And so for Father too, even the unification movement have done great things. But if at the crucial moment that we have to have this big, grand kind of like emotional explosion of joy and release and wonder, we're not there, then everything before that loses value, basically. So that's why timing is so important for us. And in the providence, we have to understand, what is the current timing now then? What's the time that we are living in this age, after Father has passed away then? Since Foundation Day, which was a big symbol crash from Father, he's giving us this big timing as a cue, saying, this marks the beginning of substantial Choneguk. There were other moments that Father proclaimed a big crash, showing us, here's another beat, let's get in the groove now, right? Father's basically trying to get us into a certain kind of groove. And with Foundation Day, that was the biggest crash symbol to give us that cue that something has shifted and we have to catch that immediately, right? And so that's what I want to talk about right now. Very quickly, I know I'm almost an hour, so I'm going to skip a couple of slides. But so here is a quote that Father gave on the first God's Day, 1968, January 1st. It says, therefore, in the judgment of the word, character, and heart on the last day, by what standard will it be conducted? Unless one rises to a position higher than the standard of Adam and Eve before their fall, one cannot appear in the position of having victoriously sought and found the word again. Nor can one be called or established before heaven as someone who has inherited God's hearts once more and who stands forth representing that inheritance. From this perspective, each of us must complete this kind of internal preparation as individuals. This word internal preparation is actually Chinese character, Japanese or Korean means like reflecting or organizing your heart. So internal like organization as individuals. The question is whether or not we have accomplished this. Standing on such a foundation, we must now launch a total advance from today onward. However, no matter how much we march forward, if we have not completed our internal preparation or to organize, we must understand that we will inevitably experience the pain of defeat. Therefore, in all of our tireless activities, we must know that the internal preparation to organize capable of supporting those actions is essential. Now, the reason why I specifically pulled out this quote here from the first God's Day, right now you're thinking like, wait, this is way long ago. So what about the cue now? In the Cosmic Assembly speech, at the introduction to the Cosmic Assembly speech that Father specifically added after the first speech. Father said, talks about the 44th God's Day, actually. And then in there, if you actually read the 44th God's Day word, it's actually quoted from the first God's Day. So Father repeats the first God's Day speech on the 44th God's Day. And for the Cosmic Assembly speech for Foundation Day, Father says that we have to check that again. So that's the temple, basically. The first crash on first God's Day, 44th God's Day, and then with the proclamation of Foundation Day, Father's giving us another hint, saying that we are coming to the point of the last days, and we need to have the internal preparation in organizing this. Otherwise, we will experience the pain of defeat. Musically speaking means that it's going to be all over the place, and no one's going to be grooving to the music anymore. And so in order for us to prepare this, we have to do something internal. That's why Father said in the Day of Victory of Love, I don't know if you caught that at the very beginning of the video, Father said, the reversal of the center has to be reversed. With the reversal of center, we will be registered based on the teaching material and textbook that Father left behind for us. And Father said, with registration, wherever you go will be heaven, actually. Meaning you can create music, actually, with anybody. You can experience this heavenly life if we have attained the divine nature of God, basically. Once we have the pulse of God, you understand your role in that current environment. You understand your relationship with that person. Many times we're not able to understand because we only look at these two notes, these two people, and it clashes. But like I said, and what the Victor Wooten also said, is context. What story are these two notes talking about? And you have to look at the chords, you have to look at the time signature, you have to look at all these variables that defines that specific note. And so many times we look at just that person and we struggle with that person, but we have to look at the general timeline of God and where is the groove before that and where are we headed towards? And what kind of music are we trying to create with this person? Every note is beautiful. Every single note is beautiful on a keyboard, right? Everything has value, but only when it is connected to the vertical, which is talking about the timing and pitch, right? If we don't connect to God's heart, which is the divine nature, then we can't experience heaven, right? And that's why here it says, right? Jesus comes to basically restore the kingdom of heaven, first on earth. That's the goal. That's what Jesus came for. That's what Father came for. That's only done when I'm in full harmony with God and possess the divine nature. Again, divine nature is referring to the heart, logos, and creativity. Sorry, originally I had a slide that I wanted to talk specifically about the heart, creativity, and logos, which all has specific meanings from the perspective of intellect, will, and emotion, but we don't have time today, so I'm going to skip that for now. But essentially, by connecting to that timing, especially the timing of God, we can be in harmony with God. And that's how we can live in the kingdom of heaven. That's what Father is saying. That's why Father said, wherever he goes, it's heaven. Father experiences heaven no matter where he goes because he's in line with the timing of God and he sees why each person is placed in certain ways. And he can create music with that. But for us, we can't because we don't even have the metronome right now. We're all over the place. And then the pitch is all over the place too, so we can't see. So it becomes all tension. We don't feel good about it. So if that's the case, we have to go back. And that's why in the principle it says we have to reconnect to that, but it's through the truth, meaning the word. We have to go back to Father's principle. Without understanding the principle, we cannot understand the beat, right? We can't understand the beat. And if we can't get to the beat, then the music is destroyed, right? And so that's the state of destruction. That's the state of the fall. And so hopefully, sorry, I admitted maybe too many videos of music, but sorry, I can geek out on music all day if I want to. I try to be more about the word as much as I could, but it's just incredible. When you look at music, there's so much incredible beauty in that in terms of the principle. And you could see how really God is like a composer. God is really composing everything so that he can create value. And he's kind of like Victor Wooten, where technically we're probably the wrong one, but he's able to create a certain kind of background beat and groove that allows us to shine. That's what Father did, really. He was this incredible musician and composer to create music with anybody he had with him, right? Because he had the internal timing with God. And so for us as well, we need to connect to God as well. Before we start composing, we have to learn to be a good musician, meaning we have to listen to the composer, right? We have to follow the composer's beats and the time signatures and all that. And then we can learn to compose our own music, which is my relationship with people, right? That's why sometimes when we try to deal with problems that we have with relationships, if you only focus on that, you'll never be able to resolve it because you're only focusing on essentially the pitch. We have to connect to the timing first. Otherwise, pitch can't be resolved. If you have timing, pitch will be no problem, basically. Meaning if you are with God, all those relationships, it won't be a big issue. You'll be able to see the purpose of why those people are in your life. And so anyways, hopefully you guys were able to enjoy a little bit of the music, but also see and understand the importance of timing in this providence. And especially now is the time of the internal providence. We had the external providence, but now Father's specifically given us the big cue that is the internal providence. And if we don't prepare that now, then we will be defeated, right? And we won't be able to experience that joy. So anyways, that basically concludes my sermon. Thank you, guys.